Welcome to the Sherman Report. Here's Peter Sherman.
A new week, new issues. Good evening. I'll take a look at the status of a variety of newsmakers, political and otherwise today, beginning with the flurry of activity inside the governing Liberal Party of Canada. Reactivated discussion of anti-Jewish activity with the arrest of a Pakistani man who appears to have been well along in planning a massive attack in a Jewish center in Brooklyn, New York. Guess where he is? Being held in Montreal pending an extradition hearing that's supposed to happen today, which, if successful, would see him turned over by the RCMP to the FBI. I'll extend that story into my thoughts on Jews in Canada, particularly at the University of Toronto, and ultimately the war in the Middle East. Stick around for all of that coming up.
Now, the Sherman Report continues.
If you follow the news, you'll know that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has been jetting around to regional Liberal Caucus meetings during the summer, trying to calm the troops and set an orderly tone and path for what happens beginning when Parliament returns next week on the 16th, to be exact. Interestingly, former Bank of Canada Governor and more recently Bank of England Governor Mark Carney is in attendance at caucus in Nanaimo, British Columbia, but not in any official capacity. He's just an expert speaker, and I'd not dispute that he is an expert. Carney knows about how the economy functions, he knows about how money works, and he has some fairly hands-on experience with addressing the moves he's made where gaining the public trust is concerned. Interestingly as well is that Carney has long been discussed publicly by many people as a great candidate for leadership of the Liberal Party somewhere down the road. I guess when Trudeau steps down or is more or less pushed out, we don't know how that's going to happen and how far down the road it's going to be. Well, go ask Justin Trudeau. He's not going to tell you. Currently, he's not making any statements about that, suggesting even the slightest consideration of stepping aside. And perhaps that is underscored by his having invited Carney to attend caucus in BC only to speak to the Liberal MPs about an economic activity plan that could inspire or inform their government policy. I tend to be more than a little skeptical when I hear statements like that. Carney, out of the goodness of his heart and strong feelings for Canada, is known as a savvy guy. Yes, he'll do what they're saying he'll do, but he'll also have his radar on high power, looking at what talent there is to work with in the caucus and taking a solid read home with him about whether and when he'd make a run for Trudeau's job. Nobody's saying that. I'm saying that. I'd say take that to the bank, in fact, but unless the Liberals create a working economic policy, I'm not sure the bank will be around to help him or anybody else. With his international experience, he is a credible person in a credible position, too, to talk about our economy and growing it in very turbulent global times. And it doesn't look like those turbulent times are getting any less turbulent. As a matter of fact, now that I think about it, and apropos of turbulent times in the world, let's all take a moment and watch the maybe 2-hour moment and watch the debate from the U.S. tomorrow evening. It looks like it'll be the only one that's there. Back to Canada, what you have to know is that plans to bring Carney in as a guest speaker preceded the Jagmeet Singh stunt of last week in ripping up his agreement of support with Prime Minister Trudeau. It depends on who you ask whether the Liberal ranks see that as a good or a bad thing. So what hurdles must the Liberal Party overcome? A majority of Canadians do not like Justin Trudeau. That's the big number one. With that as a backdrop, Canadians are not disposed to vote Liberal. Don't believe me? Take a look at any poll from any company, and you'll see they're a good 20 points behind the Conservatives. MPs are rattled by really negative reactions when they door knock. We've heard that. Campaign Director Jeremy Broadhurst resigned last week, and word is he told Trudeau he saw no path to victory at present. There's a September 16th, same day Parliament comes back, September 16th by-election in Aymar, Verdun, LaSalle. That's central Montreal. That's the seat that was held by former Justice Minister David Lametti, and for quite some time, by Prime Minister Paul Martin back in the day. If that Montreal by-election is lost, that would be an even stronger sting than what happened in Toronto St. Paul's going conservative a few months back. Trudeau has made it from pillar to post cross-country to assuage concern within his caucus ranks. Doesn't seem, if you listen to them without any names attached, doesn't seem to have helped. With the NDP leader's actions last week, the time before the next election is likely shortened, and in terms of cementing Justin Trudeau into the leader's chair for one more election, probably yes. But I'll have more to say on that in a moment. Now that you're in on a few of the to-do items, here's one I'd like to toss out that isn't necessarily to-do. They certainly don't listen to me, or anyone, it seems, but the Toronto Star used access to information to break a story about the carbon tax. They call it the carbon rebate, so they don't call it the carbon tax anymore, but I believe that we all should. It seems that charging us for carbon and then giving us some but not all of our money back every once in a little while constitutes a carbon rebate. Anyway, the Trudeau government is taking $7 million more of your tax dollars, $7 million more of our tax dollars, and spending them where? On an advertising campaign that's going to convince us how great this carbon program really is. Going to take more than that. I read that I was going to see that, I guess, television, and I couldn't believe it. You can actually hear the whispered conversations. Oh my God, they hate us for the carbon rebate program. We're going to have to do something about it. How about an ad campaign designed to tell them how much cleaner the air will be because they're paying into this program on absolutely everything? You don't believe it's built into absolutely everything that you buy? Because somehow everything has to get to a destination, doesn't it? A destination where you can buy it. That takes gas, and that means there's a carbon tax assessment in every product that you buy, in every service that arrives at your house by truck. Nobody is going to run an ad campaign to tell you that the chicken shit refund checks that you get even begin to cover the carbon tax, because they don't. The Trudeau Liberals are running a championship hidden tax program, many programs, in fact, creating a budget, for example, that is billions and billions of dollars short. That's called a deficit, means the money supply is significantly larger. The word for larger would be inflated, as in inflation. When you buy a pound of butter for $8.50, you pay for the inflationary increase that got it there. Trudeau's spending habits have built that into the butter. Okay, let's try milk. Now around what? $3, $4 per liter? You pay for the carbon tax in the fuel that it takes to run a dairy farmer's equipment to get hay into the barn. You pay the carbon tax for the fuel that heats that barn so the cows don't freeze to death in the winter. You pay the carbon tax on the fuel the milk truck burns to transport that milk to the dairy. You pay for the carbon tax built into the dairy's heating costs. And then you pay for the dairy's fuel burned to transport that milk, now pasteurized, another heating process, in cartons to your grocery supermarket. Now, that was just me discussing where the carbon tax is buried in products we all buy well before we consider fueling our own cars, for example. No advertising campaign by this government, which I get to pay for along with you, $7 million, is going to convince me that the paltry rebate checks that I get back, that you get back, are what I've spent, not by a long shot. Trudeau should be the target of another advertising campaign entitled, "Here's the guy who can screw you by sticking his hand in your pocket or person thinks you'll like it." How stupid do you think we all are? Trudeau, Guilbeault, Freeland, how stupid do you think we all are? You guys are going down whenever the next election comes. You are. I never voted for you, but everyone I know who did, at least those I've spoken to, and it's many people, can't wait to get rid of you. Before we get into questions of character or anything else, it's simply too expensive to have you around. You can't handle money. All right, let's stay on a political bent for a while and talk a little bit about a coalition that's been tossed around between the Liberals and, are you ready? The Bloc Quebecois, which in numbers is enough to get the Liberals over the top. So the Liberals may have found a friend in the Bloc Quebecois. Friend may be a way too strong a word. I don't think they like Justin any better than anyone else. I don't know why I think that. They've read the polls too. So strange bedfellows, but allies. Perhaps. Friend? I don't think so. The Quebec Party is being honest and forthright. They'll support the Trudeau government, but at a price. The price is basically built on concessions they think they can get for Quebec. Yves-François Blanchet is the leader of the Bloc Quebecois, which, let's be clear, hasn't ever won a seat outside Quebec and never could or would expect to. They're sovereigntists. They are pro-sovereignty for Quebec. Why would Trudeau, ostensibly a federalist, team up with the Bloc? Well, because it can keep him alive until the next election. And that could well drag on into when? October 2025? That's when the current mandate expires anyway. And we will have voted at that point regardless. So Trudeau needs the time to turn the polls around, he thinks. Any deal that can provide him with time is a good deal for him. At least he appears to think that way. It seems the Bloc likes holding the balance of power, at least until Canada elects a conservative majority, which the Bloc takes as a given, and they've said so. The Bloc wants to get royal recommendation for something called Bill 319, Bill 319. It gives 65 to 74-year-olds equal pension benefits to those 75 plus. It is a private member's bill, though, so royal recommendation would allow the bill to go through third reading and presumably then pass into law. The Bloc wants more immigration power for Quebec, notably on the issue of temporary foreign workers. The Bloc wants the money Quebec claims is due from the feds, and the Bloc seeks cuts to money allocated to oil companies, more healthcare funds for provinces, which is indeed a demand of the Council of Premiers, all the premiers. I don't believe Blanchet and his gang like Trudeau at all. I don't think they like Ottawa, and by being of sovereigntist orientation, it's pretty clear they don't like Canada much either. Now, I'm a native Quebecer. Je parle français. I lived there for almost 40 years before coming to Ontario for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with politics, and my French remains good. And I like Quebec. I like French people. But ever since arriving in Ontario, I've never heard anyone discuss the Bloc Quebecois, except to hear people every now and then ask questions like, how does a separatist party find its way into the House of Commons? Or why would a national government of any stripe be beholden to or dependent upon a group of Quebec sovereigntists who don't give a rat's ass about our belief system? No end of interesting scenarios now in play with the exit of the NDP as Trudeau's sole support. Back in a minute.
Now, the Sherman Report continues.
I was reading about the Pakistani national who was arrested in Quebec on his way to the American border the other day with the intent of shooting and slitting the throats of as many Jews as possible at an American center in Brooklyn. Why was it Brooklyn? Why was it in New York State? Because these geniuses had determined that there were a lot of Jewish people in that center, and very much so in Brooklyn. Police say he identifies as a member of ISIS, that the plan was a one-off because participants were planning to die as well as martyrs. That is, death by cop, I guess. He is being held on charges, but will face an extradition hearing. I believe that has happened or will be happening today. This guy, who needn't be named, wrote this, quote, "If we succeed with our plan, this would be the largest attack on U.S. soil since 9/11, end of quote. The FBI want him, and an extradition hearing is coming today or this week for sure. Well, the plan is dead in the water now. Thank goodness. Law enforcement has done its job, and I hope this guy, who somehow found his way around being identified as a threat, managed to enter Canada. He apparently was able to get by the border in ways that we can't understand. Let's leave you to imagine what that might have been. Good question anyway. It demands an answer. Another question, and this one is mine. For every one of these maniacs who come through our border and are caught like this one, how many are living among us with plans of their own and who haven't been caught? Look, I'm a Canadian and I'm a Jew. I'm a Canadian Jew, proud of it. In a few weeks, in fact, I'm proud of both those things. In a few weeks, it'll be Rosh Hashanah, our New Year, and then Yom Kippur, our very holy Day of Atonement. Synagogues will be full. Extended families and friends will assemble to celebrate the New Year with food, specialty holiday dishes, and wine. On Yom Kippur, more gatherings to break the day-long fast that is part of the atonement as well. I, for one, am glad that we have organizations and individual places of worship that plan well at all times, but never more so than for this time of year. I will go to synagogue feeling comfortable that we are safe in prayer because of the attendance by police and security officers and the electronic surveillance that can see everything without itself being seen. I think, however, that it is tragic that the campaign to convince non-Jews that we as supporters of Israel are somehow a target doesn't seem to have worked. Israel itself as the aggrieved party should not be a target either. By that, I refer to October 7th, when Israel was unilaterally attacked by Gazan militants who ruthlessly, cruelly, and in animalistic fashion attacked young men and women at a music festival, raped and slaughtered women in their homes, and executed babies in unconscionable ways. Jews did not do that. Israel has a superb armed force in the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, but it is employed as a defensive force and had no plans to attack anyone. In the last year, I have heard and seen the incessant cry for an end to the genocide by Israel. The genocide by Israel? I've heard Israel labeled an apartheid state. I've heard to repeated cries that Jews stole Palestine. I have been doing my homework all my life. First as a young Jewish person and now as an older Jewish man. The United Nations allocated and voted for Jews to be given their ancestral homeland to be developed as a modern-day Jewish state of Israel in 1948. It has realized those goals beyond our wildest dreams, and no one had to suffer for that. In fact, close to 20% of Israel's population consists of happy Arab Israelis, not bloody likely for an apartheid state bent on committing any genocide. The only genocidal words come from the other side. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Well, guess what? There is no Palestine in that territory, and there never was. And the phrase is just a couplet, a two-line rhyme that actually exhorts anyone believing in it to kill every Jew until there are none. And that, friends, is called genocide. Last week, I spoke of an article I'd read in which the writer had posited that Israel's problem is it always caved to Western powers saying, it's time for a ceasefire. It's time the fighting stops now. And then a few months later, Intifada would creep in again from the other side. Suicide bombers blowing up buses, blowing up pizzerias, lobbing rockets over the wall, knifing any unsuspecting Israeli walking the streets of Tel Aviv. I hope that what I'm seeing in Israel now is a conqueror behaving like a conqueror. In war, fighting stops when the loser capitulates and agrees to terms imposed by the winning party. Sadly, in Gaza, every last inch of territory will have to be destroyed and every last Gazan fighter neutralized for there ever to be peace. And the Israelis will have to post a permanent guard attachment on the Gaza-Egyptian border for the foreseeable future, all to prevent this from happening again. And you might say, well, why won't you negotiate a two-state solution? The answer is that it's impossible when your adversary has repeatedly rejected that concept in favor of a one-state solution they call Palestine, and which in their vision means today's Israel is completely obliterated and devoid of Jews. And I say to that, never again.
You're with the Sherman Report, daily news commentary available at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, with video posted on YouTube and Facebook. Here's Peter Sherman.
Story just makes me sad. As a Canadian, and we're on the same theme, but bringing it here home into Canada, particularly in Toronto. As a Canadian, and especially a Jewish Canadian, there is a new group operating on campus at the University of Toronto. Its name is Magen Herut Canada. They are volunteers who wear distinctive outfits and exist to afford Jewish students safe passage around campus. Do we need this? Apparently so. and especially if the university itself doesn't care enough to provide a safe environment for everyone, not least Jewish students. Aaron Hadida is the founder and leader, and he says the group is there and making itself obvious just to maintain as much order as possible and to make certain the Jewish community is safe. Their black shirts are emblazoned with the words surveillance team. Meanwhile, summer is over and campus protests by pro-Palestinian students or whomever else is with them, they've begun. About 150 of them today, with a Jewish counter-protest of about 20 students and Magen Herut Canada standing by. Aaron Hadida began recruiting others to stand with him over the last year, since the events of October 7th, 2023 triggered these situations around the world. Hadida says parents call him. They're worried about their kids. I understand that. So the group made a decision to be visible on campus, on campuses. So it's not just University of Toronto where you're going to see these people. Aaron wants Jewish students to attend classes knowing that his group has a watchful eye on them. In the parlance of the day, has their backs. Interestingly, not all members of Magen Herut Canada are Jewish. There are people who feel they want to protect Jews, provide safe passage for Jews, because they've been witness to violent acts against Jewish people, which they feel were unwarranted and uncalled for, without protection to the people who got the crap kicked out of them in one case. Some people are not happy with this, questioning whether the U of T has sanctioned the activity at all. The word vigilante has been tossed around. My view is simple. If you have a problem with Jews, maybe stay home, and especially stay away from Jewish people. They don't want the war in the Middle East any more than you do. But they also know that this war began because Hamas came into Israel from Gaza, funded by Iran, and Hamas committed hideous acts of rape and murder against Jewish citizens, moms, and even infants. Israel has taken Hamas to task for that act, and I'm afraid Israel will keep at it until every hostage is released or returned, and until Hamas is stamped out. And I heartily endorse that action. I'm Peter Sherman. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Maybe enjoyed is a little bit of a stretch because it's all been kind of nasty stuff. I hope we'll have better things to talk about later in the week, but we'll be here at 5 o'clock live on Facebook, on X, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube each day of the week, and available on petersherman.com any other time you'd like to tune in. Have a nice evening.
The Sherman Report, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the video version at YouTube, Facebook, and always at petersherman.com. Thanks for listening to The Sherman Report. If you'd like to connect with Peter directly, just go to petersherman.com.